Welcome to my channel, The Historic State. The hallowed halls of military academies are crucibles where future leaders are forged. They are places of intense pressure, rigid discipline, and intellectual rigor. Here, history is not just studied, it is revered, its lessons forming the bedrock of command. But what happens when a revered professor, a master historian, dismisses a student not for lack of knowledge, but for lack of noise? Today, we tell the story of such a clash inside the prestigious walls of West Point. It's the story of Professor Alistair Finch, a man whose word was law, and Cadet Evelyn Reed, a student so quiet she was almost invisible. He threatened her career, mocked her silence, and challenged her to prove her worth. Her response wasn't spoken, it was drawn. And the strategy she unleashed on that blackboard didn't just save her grade. It rewrote history and revealed a secret that left the entire academy speechless. Then Professor Alistair Finch was an institution within the hallowed halls of the United States Military Academy. A renowned historian, a brilliant strategist on paper at least, his classes on the art of war were legendary and notoriously difficult. He commanded his lecture hall like a battlefield general, demanding sharp answers, aggressive participation, and unwavering confidence from his cadets. He believed that leadership was loud, that brilliance announced itself. And then there was Cadet Evelyn Reed. Evelyn was an enigma. She possessed a quiet, almost unnerving stillness. Her grades were flawless, her essays insightful, her knowledge of military history encyclopedic. Yet, in Professor Finch's dynamic classroom, she rarely spoke. Her answers, when called upon, were brief, precise, almost whispered, lacking the confident projection he demanded. Then Evelyn wasn't shy, nor was she unintelligent. She simply processed the world differently. While other cadets sparred verbally in class, Evelyn absorbed, analyzed, connected historical dots in the quiet laboratory of her mind. She spent her free time not in social clubs, but buried deep within the Academy's vast archives, poring over original battle plans, studying the successes and failures of long-dead generals. History for her wasn't a performance. It was a conversation across centuries. She saw patterns others missed, understood nuances that eluded even Professor Finch. But her quiet intensity, her refusal to engage in the performative intellectual jousting Finch encouraged, marked her as a target for his academic scorn. Professor Finch saw Evelyn's silence not as thoughtfulness, but as weakness, a lack of the necessary, quote, command presence. He began to single her out, his questions growing sharper, his tone more condescending. Cadet Reed, he'd boom across the lecture hall. Perhaps you could grace us with your opinion on Hannibal's logistical failures, assuming you have one? When her answer, though correct, was delivered quietly, he'd cut her off. Louder, cadet! If you can't command your voice, how will you command men? The other cadets would shift uncomfortably, some pitying her, others perhaps relieved the attention wasn't on them. Evelyn endured it all, with her usual stoic calm, her gaze never wavering, her notes continuing meticulously. But Finch was growing increasingly frustrated. He decided he needed to make an example of her. One afternoon, towards the end of the semester, Finch laid his trap. Cadet Reed, he announced, his voice ringing with theatrical authority, stopping her as she was quietly packing her books. Your persistent silence and lack of participation border on insubordination in an academic setting. It leaves me questioning your suitability for command. Therefore, consider this your final examination, here and now. He gestured towards the massive blackboard that dominated the front wall. The Cannae Dilemma, Rome's greatest defeat, explained strategically how Scipio Africanus later adapted Hannibal's tactics to achieve victory at Zama and propose a viable alternative counter-strategy Rome could have employed at Cannae itself. The class gasped. It was a notoriously complex problem, debated by historians for centuries. On the board, cadet. Finch commanded, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Demonstrate your strategic mind, or you will fail this course. Your choice. He leaned back, arms crossed, expecting her to crumble. A heavy silence fell over the lecture hall. Every eye was on Evelyn. She stood for a moment, perfectly still. Then, without a word, she walked to the front of the room and picked up a piece of chalk. Professor Finch watched, his smirk widening, anticipating her failure. But Evelyn didn't hesitate. She began to draw. Not just writing notes, but sketching maps, troop formations, arrows indicating movements, with a speed and precision that was mesmerizing. She first laid out the Battle of Cannae, illustrating Hannibal's legendary double envelopment tactic with a clarity that surpassed even Finch's own lectures. The chalk flew across the board, her movements fluid, economical, utterly confident. She seamlessly transitioned to the Battle of Zama, demonstrating Scipio's brilliant countermaneuvers, his use of cavalry, his adaptation of Hannibal's own tactics. It was a masterful summary. Then she paused, she turned slightly, looked at the Cannae diagram, and began drawing again, but this time, it was something new. Something radical. She wasn't just explaining history. She was rewriting it. She proposed an alternative Roman strategy for Cannae, one involving unorthodox legion formations, a calculated use of the river Aufidus as a defensive anchor, a feigned retreat designed to lure Hannibal's cavalry into a trap, and a psychological element targeting the Gauls in his army. It was brilliant, it was audacious, it was something Professor Finch in all his years of study had never even conceived. The cadets were leaning forward, utterly captivated. Finch's smug expression had vanished, replaced by wide-eyed, slack-jawed disbelief. Finally, she placed the chalk down. The massive blackboard was covered in a breathtaking tapestry of strategic genius, a complex, beautiful, and utterly convincing alternative history. Evelyn turned, her face still calm, and simply looked at Professor Finch, waiting. The room was deathly silent. Finch stared at the blackboard, his eyes tracing the intricate movements, the brilliant feints, the logical coherence of her radical plan. He then looked at Evelyn, truly looked at her, for the first time. He opened his mouth, closed it, utterly speechless. Several long, agonizing seconds passed. Finally, Finch cleared his throat, his usual booming voice reduced to a humbled whisper. "Cadet, Reed," he stammered, shaking his head slightly in awe. "My God, that's extraordinary. Where did you learn to analyze, to strategize like this? Who taught you?" Evelyn allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to touch her lips. "My father taught me, sir," she replied quietly. "He always encouraged me to look beyond the accepted narrative. We used to discuss these battles over dinner." Finch looked confused. "Your father? A historian?" Evelyn simply added, "General Elias Reed, sir." Another gasp rippled through the room, louder this time. General Elias Reed, the legendary, almost mythical strategist, the architect. Hidden genius, shattered arrogance, and a strategy that stunned the experts moved you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because here, we believe history's greatest lessons are often delivered in the quietest voices.